On the 18th day of July, in the year 64 of the Common Era, a fire ignited in the merchant shops clustered around the Circus Maximus in Rome, and within hours, the greatest city in the ancient world became an inferno that would forever alter the tinger. Reputation of one of history's most controversial rulers. Emperor Nero, Claudius, Caesar Augustus, Germanicus stood at a crossroads of historical judgment, even before the flames consumed Rome's wooden tenements and marble temples. Born Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus in the year 37, he entered a world of palace intrigue, poisoned chalices, and murderous ambition. His mother, Agrippina the Younger, possessed a ruthlessness that would shape her son's destiny in ways both profound and destructive. She maneuvered him onto the throne at merely 16 years of age, when Emperor Claudius, her husband and Nero's adoptive father, died under suspicious circumstances in the year 54. The early years of Nero's reign revealed a young emperor guided by capable advisors. Seneca the Younger, the Stoic philosopher and dramatist, alongside Sextus Afranius Burrus, the Praetorian prefect, steered the inexperienced ruler through the treacherous waters of imperial politics. These first 5 years, often called the Quinquennium Neronis, witnessed administrative reforms, reduced taxation, and relative political stability. The Senate enjoyed greater autonomy than under previous emperors. Public games and theatrical performances flourished. Rome seemed to have discovered a ruler who might balance autocratic power with benevolent governance. Yet beneath this veneer of enlightened rule, darker currents swirled. Nero's relationship with his domineering mother deteriorated rapidly as he sought independence from her controlling influence. Agrippina had orchestrated his ascension, expecting to rule through him, but the young emperor chafed under her constant interference. When she threatened to champion his stepbrother Britannicus as a rival claimant, the threat was eliminated. Britannicus died suddenly during a dinner in the year 55, allegedly poisoned. Ancient historians, particularly Tacitus and Suetonius, point to Nero as the architect of this fratricide, though direct evidence remains circumstantial. The emperor's personal life increasingly dominated his political decisions. His marriage to Claudia Octavia, daughter of the former emperor, became a prison of dynastic obligation. Nero sought passion elsewhere, finding it first with a freedwoman named Claudia Octa, then more fatally with Poppaea Sabina, a beautiful and ambitious noblewoman already married to his friend Marcus Salvius. Although Poppaea's influence would prove catastrophic, driving Nero to eliminate obstacles to their union with escalating violence. In the year 59, Nero orchestrated the murder of his own mother, after failed attempts involving a collapsing ceiling and a sabotaged boat designed to sink in the Bay of Naples. He dispatched assassins to Agrippina's villa at Baiae. According to the historian Cassius Dio, when the killers entered her chamber, Agrippina bared her womb and declared, "Strike here, for this bore Nero." The matricide shocked Roman society despite Agrippina's own bloody reputation. Seneca crafted a letter to the Senate justifying the act by claiming Agrippina had plotted against the emperor, but few were convinced. This context is drawn from the detailed accounts preserved by the Roman historian Tacitus in his Annals, which remain our most comprehensive source for understanding Nero's reign despite their author's own aristocratic biases. By the year 64, Nero had shed his advisor's restraining influence. Burrus had died in 62, possibly poisoned. Seneca had been forced into retirement. The emperor increasingly indulged his artistic ambitions, performing publicly as a singer and charioteer, activities considered beneath imperial dignity by Rome's traditional aristocracy. He divorced and exiled Octavia before having her executed, clearing the path to marry Poppaea. The Senate seethed with resentment, but remained impotent against the Praetorian Guard's loyalty to their generous emperor. Into this volatile atmosphere came the Great Fire and catastrophe that would crystallize Nero's legacy and raise questions that echo through millennia. The flames that began in the Circus Maximus on that sweltering July night spread with terrifying speed through Rome's densely packed neighborhoods. The city's topography worked against firefighting efforts. 7 hills funneled winds that transformed the blaze into a roaring monster, consuming everything in its path. Timber-framed apartment blocks called insulae, stacked 5 and 6 stories high and separated by narrow alleyways, became vertical chimneys. The fire fed on olive oil stored in ground-floor shops, pitch used to waterproof roofs, and the countless wooden furnishings of a city home to over 1 million inhabitants. For 6 days and 7 nights, the inferno raged. Ancient Rome possessed organized fire brigades, the vigils, but their efforts proved futile against a disaster of this magnitude. The flames leaped the Servian wall, consumed the Forum Romanum, and destroyed temples standing for centuries. The shrine of Vesta housing Rome's sacred eternal flame. The Regia, where the Pontifex Maximus resided, all fell to the blaze. Neighborhoods that had existed since Rome's founding evaporated into ash and memory. Contemporary accounts describe apocalyptic scenes. Tacitus writes of panicked crowds trampled in narrow streets, of elderly citizens unable to flee, of parents separated from children in the chaos. The Tiber River became choked with refugees, desperate to escape. Looters operated openly amid the confusion, while others stood paralyzed by shock, watching generations of accumulated wealth vanish. The fire's heat reportedly grew so intense that it created its own weather system, generating winds that spread embers across vast distances. Where was Nero during this catastrophe? This question has fueled debate for 2 millennia. The popular legend holds that he fiddled while Rome burned, an impossibility since the fiddle would not be invented for over 1,000 years. Image derives from accounts suggesting Nero played his lyre and sang of Troy's destruction while watching Rome's devastation from the Tower of Maecenas. Suetonius and Cassius Dio promote this narrative of callous indifference, even celebrating the aesthetic spectacle of urban destruction. However, Tacitus, no friend to Nero's memory, provides a different account. The historian states that Nero was at Antium, his birthplace some 35 miles from Rome, when the fire began. Upon receiving news of the disaster, the emperor rushed back to the city. Rather than entertaining himself with musical performances, Nero opened imperial gardens to refugees, requisitioned public buildings to house the displaced, and organized food supplies from Ostia and neighboring towns. He reduced the price of grain to prevent starvation. The emperor even opened his own palace grounds to the homeless multitude. Nero personally supervised firefighting efforts. He ordered the demolition of buildings in the fire's path to create fire breaks, a desperate tactic that finally brought the conflagration under control after it had destroyed 10 of Rome's 14 administrative districts. 3 districts were completely annihilated. 7 more suffered severe damage. Only 4 neighborhoods escaped significant harm. Yet these relief efforts, genuine though they may have been, could not suppress the questions circulating through the traumatized populace. Who started the fire? Rome had experienced urban blazes before, but none approached this scale. Rumors began immediately, whispered accusations that spread as rapidly as the flames themselves had done. Some claimed they witnessed men preventing firefighting efforts, throwing torches into unburned buildings, declaring they acted under orders. Others insisted the fire began simultaneously in multiple locations, suggesting coordination rather than accident. The most explosive rumor targeted the emperor himself, according to historian Suetonius in his work, The Lives of the 12 Caesars. Public opinion held that Nero deliberately ordered Rome burned to clear space for his architectural ambitions. The emperor had long desired to rebuild the capital along more grandiose lines, renaming it Neropolis. What better opportunity than comprehensive destruction? Whether Nero bore responsibility for the fire's ignition remains one of ancient history's unsolved mysteries. What is certain is that he recognized the political danger these accusations represented. He needed a scapegoat. In the smoking ruins of Rome, with hundreds of thousands homeless and conspiracy theories poisoning the atmosphere, Nero identified a target for public rage: the Christians. This small, peculiar sect, followers of an executed Jewish preacher named Jesus of Nazareth, had established a foothold in Rome's immigrant communities. To most Romans, Christians represented a bizarre and antisocial cult that refused to honor traditional gods, rejected participation in civic religious ceremonies, and spoke ominously of an oncoming apocalypse when the world would be consumed by fire. That final detail proved fatal. Christians openly proclaimed that the current world order would be destroyed and replaced by their God's kingdom. To a traumatized population seeking explanations for catastrophe, this eschatological belief sounded like confession. Nero exploited this suspicion with ruthless efficiency, transforming theological rhetoric into evidence of arson. According to Tacitus, the emperor fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace. The persecution that followed exceeded even Rome's brutal standards. Tacitus describes horrors that shocked even his jaded sensibilities. Christians were arrested in vast numbers, not merely for alleged arson, but as the historian notes, for hatred of the human race. A charge stemming from their refusal to participate in traditional social and religious activities. The accused faced torture to extract confessions and implicate others, creating a cascade of arrests that swept through Rome's Christian community. The executions became public spectacles designed to entertain and pacify the masses. In Nero's gardens and in the Circus Maximus, where the fire had begun, Christians were torn apart by dogs. Some were crucified, a punishment typically reserved for slaves and rebels. Others were covered in animal skins and hunted for sport. Most infamously, Nero ordered Christians to be coated with pitch and set ablaze as human torches to illuminate his gardens during evening entertainments. These living candles transformed religious persecution into theatrical performance, satisfying Roman appetites for spectacular violence, while simultaneously demonstrating imperial power over those who threatened social order. Among the victims were figures who would become foundational to Christian history and mythology. Tradition holds that Peter, the fisherman, who had been Jesus' foremost disciple, was crucified in Rome during this persecution, though he requested to be executed upside down, considering himself unworthy to die in the same manner as his master. Paul of Tarsus, the missionary who had transformed Christianity from a Jewish sect into a universal religion, was reportedly beheaded a more merciful execution befitting his Roman citizenship. While the precise dating and details of these apostolic martyrdoms remain debated by scholars, the Neronian persecution unquestionably created Christianity's first major generation of martyrs. According to research documented by Cambridge historian Shay Cohen in his studies of early Christianity, the persecution served multiple purposes for Nero's regime. It deflected blame for the fire, eliminated a group considered socially subversive, and provided entertainment for a population whose loyalty the emperor desperately needed to maintain. Yet Tacitus, writing decades later during the reign of Trajan, reveals an unexpected consequence. Despite his own contempt for Christians, the historian notes that even Romans who considered the sect detestable began to pity the victims. The punishments seemed disproportionate, motivated not by public interest, but by the cruelty of one man, rather than fully succeeding in scapegoating Christians. The persecution began to backfire, redirecting sympathy toward the victims and intensifying suspicions about Nero himself. The emperor remained oblivious to this shifting sentiment. He proceeded with his grand architectural project. The Domus Aureata Golden House's sprawling palace complex covering over 300 acres of central Rome. Its entrance featured a colossal bronze statue of Nero himself, 120 feet tall. The palace grounds included an artificial lake, landscaped parks, colonnaded pavilions, and interiors decorated with gold leaf, precious gems, and innovative rotating ceiling panels that showered flower petals and perfume on guests. The Domus Aurea stood as a monument to megalomania, its construction consuming resources desperately needed for rebuilding the city. While ordinary Romans struggled to reconstruct homes and livelihoods, their emperor erected a pleasure palace in the heart of the devastated capital. The architectural marvel's dining rooms featured ivory ceilings with panels that slid aside to rain roses on diners below. Water cascaded through elaborate fountain systems. Nero's architects and engineers created a revolution in Roman construction, pioneering the use of concrete domes and vaults that would influence architecture for centuries. But such innovation came at a price measured in both treasure and political capital. To fund his vision, Nero implemented increasingly oppressive taxation and appropriated wealth through accusations of treason. Wealthy senators found themselves charged with conspiracy, their properties confiscated upon conviction. The emperor's agents roamed the provinces extracting tribute, plundering temples of their treasures, and debasing the currency by reducing the precious metal content of coins. The denarius, Rome's silver standard, was diluted from 99% purity to 93%, a significant devaluation that undermined economic confidence. In the year 65, barely a year after the Great Fire, Nero's paranoia materialized into genuine conspiracy. The Pisonian conspiracy, named for its leader Gaius Calpurnius Piso, revealed the breadth of senatorial opposition to the emperor. Dozens of aristocrats, military officers, and intellectuals plotted Nero's assassination and replacement with Piso, a respected nobleman untainted by imperial blood. The conspiracy involved elaborate planning. Nero would be stabbed during games at the Circus Maximus, allowing the plotters to present his death as the act of a single madman, while Praetorian Guard conspirators secured military control. Betrayal undid the plot. A freedwoman named Epicharis and several slaves revealed the conspiracy's existence through torture. Though many refused to name their fellow conspirators even under extreme duress, Nero responded with a purge that decimated Rome's aristocracy. 19 executions and countless exiles followed. Victims included Seneca, Nero's former tutor and advisor, who was ordered to commit suicide despite questionable evidence of involvement. The philosopher opened his veins in a stoic death that became legendary, his wife Pompey Paulina attempting to die alongside him until prevented by Nero's orders. Gaius Petronius, the writer and arbiter of taste at Nero's court, also received orders for suicide. In a final act of defiance, Petronius spent his last hours not composing flattering messages to the emperor, but writing a detailed account of Nero's sexual debaucheries, which he sealed and sent to the palace before opening his veins. The poet Lucan, nephew of Seneca and author of the epic Pharsalia, died reciting his own verses about a wounded soldier. The purge eliminated not merely conspirators, but the last vestige of literary and philosophical excellence surrounding the emperor. Poppaea Sabina, Nero's second wife, and perhaps the only person he genuinely loved, died in the year 65, under circumstances that further blackened his reputation. Suetonius claims that Nero kicked the pregnant Poppaea to death during an argument, while Tacitus suggests illness was the cause. Whatever the truth, her death devastated the emperor. He had her body embalmed in the manner of Eastern monarchs rather than cremated according to Roman custom, and delivered a eulogy himself. In his grief and instability, Nero sought replacements first, attempting to transform a freedman named Sporus through castration and marriage ceremonies, then marrying Statilia Messalina after forcing her husband's suicide. The emperor's grip on reality seemed to slip further. He embarked on a theatrical tour of Greece in the year 66, competing in every major games and festival. Greek organizers, terrified of offending him, rescheduled competitions to accommodate his visit and ensured he won every contest singing, chariot racing, acting. Nero returned to Rome in the year 68 with 1,808 victory crowns, convinced of his artistic genius while the empire teetered toward collapse. The end approached with terrible inevitability. In the spring of the year 68, Julius Vindex, governor of Gallia Lugdunensis, raised the standard of rebellion. His revolt provided the catalyst for simmering discontent throughout the empire to ignite into open defiance. Though Vindex's forces were defeated by loyal legions, his uprising emboldened Servius Sulpicius Galba, governor of Hispania Tarraconensis, to march on Rome. More critically, the Praetorian Guard, emperor's personal military force, transferred their loyalty to Galba when he promised them larger donatives than Nero could afford. The Senate, cowed for 14 years, suddenly found courage. They declared Nero an enemy of the state, a pronouncement carrying the death penalty of being beaten to death with rods of fate designed for the lowest criminals. Nero's support evaporated overnight. His freedmen and slaves abandoned the Golden House. His advisors fled. The emperor, who had commanded legions from Britain to Judea, found himself alone and hunted. On the 9th of June, in the year 68, 30-year-old Nero fled Rome in the pre-dawn darkness, accompanied by only 4 loyal freedmen. They rode to the villa of his freedman Finn, located about 4 miles from the city. Approaching hoofbeats announced pursuing cavalrymen. Nero's companions urged him to suicide to avoid capture and ritual humiliation. The emperor hesitated, reportedly practicing phrases and lamenting, "What an artist dies in me." This exclamation, preserved by Suetonius, encapsulates Nero's self-perception, not as statesman or general, but his misunderstood creative genius. Unable to drive the dagger into his own throat, Nero required assistance from his secretary, Epaphroditus. As life ebbed from Rome's 5th emperor, he died believing himself a tragic figure. Persecuted for his artistic vision rather than punished for tyrannical excess. His final words allegedly echoed a Greek phrase, "Too late, this is fidelity." The age of the Julio-Claudians, founded by Augustus and carried through Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, and finally Nero, ended in a suburban villa with a corpse denied proper burial in the family mausoleum. Nero's death triggered the Year of the Four Emperors, a brutal civil war as Galba, Otho, Vitellius, and finally Vespasian fought for the purple. The instability vindicated those who had maintained that, for all his faults, Nero had provided order. Yet subsequent emperors systematically dismantled his legacy. The Domus Aurea was stripped of treasures, buried under rubble, and built over. Vespasian constructed the Flavian Amphitheater, the Colosseum, on the site of Nero's artificial lake, transforming the emperor's private pleasure grounds into public entertainment space. The colossal statue of Nero was remodeled into Sol Invictus, the sun god, its association with the disgraced emperor erased. How ought history to judge Emperor Nero? The question admits no simple answer. Ancient historians like Tacitus, Suetonius, and Cassius Dio created the template of Nero as monstrous tyrant, matricide, arsonist, persecutor, and madman. This interpretation dominated for centuries, reinforced by Christian tradition that remembered him as the first imperial persecutor of the faith. The Book of Revelation's cryptic reference to the beast, whose number is 666, may encode Nero Caesar in Hebrew gematria, cementing his status in religious literature as an antichrist figure. Yet modern scholarship complicates this portrait. Nero's early reign demonstrated competent administration. His relief efforts during the fire appear genuine. The prosecution of Christians, while horrific by modern standards, reflected common Roman attitudes toward groups threatening social cohesion. His architectural ambitions, though extravagant, pushed Roman engineering to new heights. The common people loved him for his games and public performances, creating a legend that Nero would return, the Nero Redivises myth that spawned several impostors claiming his identity decades after his death. Perhaps Nero represents not simple villainy, but the corruption inherent in absolute power granted to a youth unprepared for its weight, a cautionary tale echoing across centuries.